something is quietly burning inside millions of people right now, and most of them have no idea. Imagine standing in a sunlit field, feeling tired for no clear reason. Your joints ache a little, your mind feels foggy, your body feels heavier than it should. You have tried sleeping more, you have tried eating better, and still something feels off. Something beneath the surface, something you cannot quite name. What if the tiredness you feel every morning, the ache in your joints, the fog in your mind, what if none of that is just getting older? Inflammation. The word sounds clinical, cold, medical, but what it describes is something deeply human, a fire that starts inside your own body, meant to protect you, but that sometimes forgets to stop. Doctors, researchers, and nutritionists around the world have been studying this for decades, and what they are finding right now is changing the way we understand everyday pain, fatigue, and disease. This is not a story about a rare condition. This is a story about something happening inside nearly every adult body on this planet. And more importantly, it is a story about what you can actually do about it. The story of inflammation does not begin in a modern laboratory. It begins centuries ago with a Roman physician named Aulus Cornelius Celsus. Around 30 AD, he wrote down 4 words that doctors still use today: redness, swelling, heat, pain. He was describing what happens when you cut your finger or twist your ankle. He was describing the body defending itself. For hundreds of years, that was the full picture. Inflammation was short. It was visible. It was something that happened, and then it stopped. The body raised its defenses, fought off the threat, and returned to calm. That was the design. That was how it was supposed to work. Then came the 20th century. Researchers began noticing something strange. Some patients had no visible wound, no infection, no obvious injury. And yet, deep inside their blood, their tissue, their organs, something was inflamed. Something was quietly activated, like a fire left burning in an empty room. Nobody had started it on purpose, and nobody seemed able to turn it off. By the 1970s and 1980s, scientists began connecting this hidden inflammation to diseases that had always seemed unrelated: heart disease, type 2 diabetes, certain cancers, even depression. The connections were uncomfortable because they suggested that many of the most common killers in modern life shared a single, silent root. The medical world was slow to accept this. For decades, inflammation was still treated as a symptom, something to suppress with medication and move on from. The deeper question, why the fire started in the first place, was not yet being asked loudly enough. The focus was on managing disease, not on understanding the environment inside the body that allowed disease to grow. The answer, researchers began to argue in the early 2000s, was not just biological. It was cultural. It was environmental. It was the food people ate, the air they breathed, the hours they slept or did not sleep. Modern life, with all its convenience and speed, had quietly created the perfect conditions for chronic inflammation to thrive. In 2004, Time magazine published a landmark cover story. It called chronic inflammation the engine of nearly every major disease. That single cover story brought the conversation out of medical journals and into living rooms for the first time. Suddenly, people who had never heard the word inflammation were asking their doctors about it. Something had shifted. Research accelerated after that. Scientists at Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and Oxford began publishing studies showing that ultra-processed food, foods stripped of fiber, loaded with refined sugar and industrial seed oils, was not just unhealthy in a vague sense. It was actively triggering inflammatory responses in the body. Day after day, meal after meal, The body was reading these foods as a form of threat and responding accordingly. Between 2015 and 2020, a new body of research emerged, this time focused not on what was harming the body, but on what was helping it heal. Scientists began studying populations that showed unusually low rates of chronic disease. People in rural Sardinia, Italy, communities in Okinawa, Japan, villages in rural Greece. What these populations shared was not a miracle drug. It was not a supplement sold in a bottle. It was a way of eating and living that was rich in plants, movement, rest, and connection with other people. Their bodies were not inflammation-free, but their inflammation was responding the way it was designed to, rising when needed, and then, crucially, stopping. By 2023, the science had reached a kind of quiet consensus. Chronic inflammation was not inevitable. It was not simply the price of aging. It was, in large part, a response to choices, environments, and habits. And that meant it could be changed. Let us be clear about something before we go further. Not every natural remedy you find online is backed by science. Not every claim made on social media is true. What follows is only what has been reported, studied, and in many cases confirmed by credible research institutions. Where the evidence is still developing, we will say so honestly. One of the most consistently supported findings in inflammation research involves omega-3 fatty acids. These are natural compounds found in fatty fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, as well as in walnuts and flax seeds. Multiple large-scale studies have reported that regular consumption of omega-3s is associated with measurably lower levels of inflammatory markers in the blood, particularly a protein called C-reactive protein. The VITAL study, conducted by Harvard Medical School and published in 2022, followed over 25,000 adults for 5 years. It reported that participants who consumed omega-3s regularly showed a statistically significant reduction in inflammatory disease risk. This was one of the largest studies of its kind ever conducted. Researchers at Oxford University published findings in 2021 reporting that diets rich in polyphenols, natural compounds found in berries, dark leafy greens, green tea, and extra virgin olive oil were associated with lower levels of a key inflammatory signaling molecule in the body called interleukin-6. People who consumed the most plant-based polyphenols consistently showed quieter inflammatory activity compared to those who ate fewer plants. The researchers were careful to note that the association was strong, but that further study was still needed to confirm the full picture. Sleep is not passive. While the body rests, it actively regulates inflammation. The University of California, Berkeley published research in 2019 confirming that even a single night of poor sleep, less than 6 hours, caused a measurable spike in inflammatory markers the following day. According to their research, chronic sleep deprivation essentially keeps the body's inflammatory response in a state of low-level permanent activation. It is like leaving the alarm system of a building switched on permanently. Eventually, it begins to damage the building itself. The American Psychological Association reported in 2023 that chronic psychological stress, the kind that does not resolve, the kind that sits in the body for months or years, is one of the most underestimated drivers of systemic inflammation. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, is actually anti-inflammatory in small, short bursts. But when cortisol remains elevated for long periods, the body's cells begin to lose sensitivity to it. The anti-inflammatory signal stops working. And without that signal, inflammation quietly climbs. The World Health Organization confirmed in its 2022 Global Physical Activity Report that regular moderate exercise, defined as 150 minutes per week of brisk walking, swimming, or cycling, was associated with significant reductions in chronic inflammatory markers across all age groups studied. Importantly, the research also reported that intense exercise, done excessively and without adequate rest, could temporarily raise inflammation. The relationship between movement and inflammation is not simply more is better. It is about consistency, moderation, and recovery. Chronic inflammation is now linked to many modern diseases, but scientists still debate how best to fight it. Popular supplements like turmeric show promise, yet many are poorly absorbed by the body. Gut health also matters, but researchers warn that many probiotic claims are exaggerated. For millions of people, inflammation means daily fatigue, pain, poor sleep, and feeling unwell without clear answers. Scientists now believe stress, processed food, inactivity, and lack of sleep keep the body stuck in a constant state of immune activation, like a smoke alarm that never turns off. The strongest evidence points toward simple lifestyle changes: better sleep, whole foods, exercise, stress reduction, and fewer processed foods. Small, consistent habits like walking daily, sleeping earlier, or improving one meal a day can slowly reduce inflammation and improve long-term health.